Everyone, welcome to episode 35 of Trucksafe Live, the show where we and our guests tackle the hot button issues impacting highway transportation. Lost Rob, not a great start here. But anyway, Trucksafe Live, like I said, show where we and our guests tackle the hot button issues impacting highway transportation. I'm Brandon. That's Rob. He's back. We're with Trucksafe, and which is dedicated to helping motor carriers develop and maintain cutting-edge safety programs. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, tuning in. Rob, what's going on in Virginia nowadays?
Not a lot. It's not raining. It's not snowing. It's just Virginia.
We had the sun come out for the first time all month. Well, actually, new month. So I think I heard somewhere that January was like the fifth cloudiest month in Indiana since 1950. This past January. So it was depressing.
Yeah, I've been seeing Indiana on the news a lot more than I've seen Virginia. So
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hopefully, probably a bad thing. Anyway, looking forward to today's show. We're talking about compliance management best practices. Looking forward to welcoming our guest on, Toan from Hall, co-founder of Hall. Looking forward to talking about some practical tips that motor carriers can implement to better manage their compliance processes, driver qualification, hours of service, vehicle maintenance, that type of stuff. Rachel from LinkedIn says, happy to be here and learn more about everything related to trucking. Thanks for joining us, Rachel. If anybody else is here with us, say hey in the comments so we know who's around. And before we get to today's discussion, first of all, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is Taking the Higher Road, a Driver Reach and Freight Waves production. It's a weekly show and podcast airing every Thursday. Join host Jeremy Raymer, founder of Driver Reach, as he interviews industry experts and thought leaders who bring their insight to the driver life cycle as they discuss the industry's greatest challenges, driver recruiting and retention. Be sure to check them out wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again to Taking the Higher Road. A couple things going on in the industry that I think are worth talking about. Rashonda says, hey, Rashonda, thanks for joining us. Saw a couple things come down this week, Rob. You probably saw them as well. First up was the announcement that FMCSA Administrator Robin Hutchinson resigned, which I didn't really see coming. Did you see that one coming?
I didn't. But after that happened, I wasn't necessarily surprised to see that the speed limiter proposal kind of pushed out a little bit. So, yeah,
those two I have to believe are kind of connected. So,
right.
Robin Hutchinson, administrator of FMCSA, I think she was confirmed maybe a year and a half ago by the U.S. Senate. There's been a lot of turnover in that position, but she was confirmed a year and a half ago. But more recently, she got a lot of blowback from Congress, from the U.S. Congress on the speed limiter rule specifically. And I have to wonder if that played at least some part in maybe her decision to step down. Hard telling. We're just speculating, obviously. But anyway, she stepped down last week, and so now we are once again without a confirmed administrator. Sue Lawless, who was the FMCSA's assistant administrator, also chief safety officer, she stepped into the position of acting administrator in Robin's absence. But anyway, so that was pretty big news. As Rob mentioned, the other one was the delay of the speed limiter rule. This came down last week. USDOT published its significant rulemaking agenda for all of the sub-agencies under the USDOT. For FMCSA's part, the big news there was the speed limiter rule, which was supposed to come out in December of last year, has been delayed until at least May of 2024. No doubt in light of heavy blowback from the industry with regard to this rulemaking. Thoughts on speed limiters, Rob?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think, like you said, it's just pushed out till May. So I think you'll still see it.
Probably so. And it's going to take the form of a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking. So the original rulemaking activity, I think, began in 2016 with a joint rule proposed by both FMCSA and NHTSA. And then it got shelved for the last several years. And so we will see a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking, not a final rule yet. So once they publish the supplemental notice, then they will open it up presumably for comments again. What we still don't know about that rule is what the actual speed limit is going to be set at once it gets set. They've proposed a range, I think 60 62 to 68 or something like that. But we'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, point is, it's been delayed till May. A couple of other things going on. FMCSA, and we published articles on both of these on our website over at trucksafe.com. If you're interested in reading more about these, head over there. We've also got a video on one of these on our YouTube channel. First up, FMCSA sent out a notice a couple days ago saying that they are planning to remove over 15,000 medical examiners from the National Registry of Medical Examiners. Apparently, these are medical examiners that are on the registry currently, but have not yet set up their login.gov accounts in order to be able to continue accessing their accounts. Anybody watching may know, if you're a motor carrier, FMCSA recently went through this data security implementation where they are now requiring motor carriers and other stakeholders to have two-factor authentication set up to access data through their various technology systems, one of which is the National Registry of Medical Examiners. And apparently there are like 15,000 plus medical examiners that haven't set up those accounts. And so they're going to remove them from the National Registry if they don't set up their accounts in the next 30 days or so. So, I think the notice said there are currently like close to 100,000 medical examiners on the registry. So we're talking a relatively low percentage of those are going to be removed, but it's still it's still a substantial issue, it sounds like.
Yeah, I actually, when you initially put this out, that was the first time I'd read it, and I was thinking, it took the login.gov, not signing up for login.gov, to eliminate some of these folks, but. Like I thought to myself, like I've met some shady medical examiners, some based in gas stations, and then
you know what? Those are probably the ones that were the first to set up their login.gov account, so they're going to be good. They're going to be good to go probably. But anyway, I agree. I've seen some pretty crazy stuff with regard to driver medical exams. So there are some issues with that program. Obviously, National Registry went a long way, I think, to reduce some of the fraud, but still not without its issues. Brian on LinkedIn, hey, Brian is saying New Jersey insurance minimum. Yeah, this was another significant thing that has come down within the last couple of weeks. I didn't have it on my list here today, but from what I understand, the state of New Jersey has pushed through a law that any motor carriers that have operations or vehicles domiciled in the state are now going to be subject to a $1.5 million minimum insurance requirement for commercial motor vehicles, which is double what it is at the federal level. Federal level is $750,000 for non-hazmat interstate operations. New Jersey is going to be $1.5 million. As I talked with Brian offline about, I question whether New Jersey has the legal authority to do this in the first place, and I anticipate that it's going to be challenged in court. But that did come through. I don't know when it takes effect. Brian, if you know, put it in the comments there. But that would be a significant problem potentially for fleets with New Jersey operations if you are only carrying the $750,000 minimum that FMCSA requires. Lastly, the one that we have a video on our YouTube channel and also an article on our website, FMCSA published a notice today about proposed changes to its CDL program. There are a handful of proposals that they're looking at, really geared towards the testing program and the CLP, commercial learners permits, and essentially I think the rationale for it is to remove some barriers to entry. It seemed like these changes are probably good things to allow drivers to more easily get CDLs without some of the red tape that currently exists. For example, one of the proposals is to remove the existing 14-day waiting period that now exists, where you have to wait 14 days after you get your CLP before you're eligible to take the skills test. They're talking about getting rid of that. They are also talking about allowing the states to administer the skills test to drivers who aren't residents of their state and who didn't get training in their state. Right now, states can only administer the skills test to drivers who obtain their training in the state, but they're looking at doing away with that. largely because of the implementation of the entry-level driver training rule, which kind of standardized testing across the states. So anyway, like I said, a handful of those changes. Rob, did any of those changes stick out in your view?
No, I thought the $1.5 million one was kind of funny, but funny in a bad way. But my first thought from an insurance perspective was, I wonder how many of our fraudsters are going to start moving to New Jersey for
for their staged accidents.
Practicing their craft.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, but that probably will happen. Unfortunately, what we really need is FMCSA to revisit the minimum insurance requirement, which they've toyed around with for years. I think we've had 750,000 as the minimum since the 80s. It has not gone up. It has not tracked inflation, but they have been toying around with raising it, but they have not gone anywhere with it. So we'll just wait and see. All right, that's going to wrap up kind of things going on in the industry. A few things going on at Trucksafe that we wanted to mention for those who are interested. As always, if you're not a part of our Trucksafe Compliance Network, be sure to join that, trucksafenetwork.com. This is a social network for fleet safety professionals to gather together, learn from one another, ask questions, and also access all of our Trucksafe content, our videos, articles, webinars, podcasts, and everything like that. We also have an app in the App Store. Just search Trucksafe and you will find it. We hope to see you there. What else we got going on at Trucksafe, Rob? We got our boot camp that we are in the midst of planning. I know a lot of people have been asking us when we're going to do our next Trucksafe Fleet Compliance boot camp. Last one we did was in Orlando last fall. We have made some progress in planning our next one. It's looking like it's going to be in Indianapolis again in the fall of this year, probably the last 2 weeks of September, most likely. We should have those dates finalized, I think, in the next week or so, and then we will publish the details on our website, trucksafebootcamp.com. This is our 2-day in-depth conference, in-person conference, where Rob and I and others really dig into the nitty-gritty of DOT compliance with all in attendance, and leave time for questions, obviously, and also just networking with the folks there. It's been a great event. Looking forward to that. So stay tuned for that. Best way to keep up to date with everything we got going on at Trucksafe is through our newsletter. You could subscribe to that over at trucksafe.com/subscribe. We try not to be spammy. We just send out breaking regulatory news and that type of stuff. Greg from YouTube saying Indy, question mark. No Florida. We were just in Florida, Greg. We were in Orlando last fall. So we got to kind of move things around here. We wanted to do Nashville, but I'm going to tell you, we priced it out. Nashville was going to be a heck of a lot more expensive than Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is where I'm based, so it makes things a lot easier. We got to make Rob fly over to Indianapolis to do it, but yeah.
Well, Indy's good for fall anyway, and I liked Indy actually. I mean, I get a lot of people that they want to go to India, but to me it wasn't bad at all. I actually enjoyed it. So
yeah, and it's right downtown. We're right on the circle. Everything's within walking distance. A lot of restaurants, a lot of stuff to do. So yeah. That's my sales pitch for Indianapolis. But anyway, we hope to see you there. So trucksafebootcamp.com is where you can eventually find the details on that. All right. Enough about us. Let's move on to today's topic. Again, today's episode is titled Compliance Management Best Practices. What are some practical things that fleets of all types and sizes can do to help them better manage their compliance obligations? Whether it's qualifying drivers, training them on the rules, maintaining their equipment, and everything in between. Those are the questions. It's a discussion that we've had with quite a few of our clients recently, and it's one I think would be helpful to explore, particularly for newer carriers and smaller ones that are just getting into the grind of managing compliance. What steps can and should they take to make things easier for them and help prevent compliance gaps and the exposure that comes with it? Obviously, glad to have Rob with me again today. He has lived in those trenches for many years as a safety director at large fleets. He's built compliance programs from the ground up. And also, we're excited to be joined by our guest today, Mr. Toan Nguyen, co-founder of Hall, which is an AI-based compliance management platform that helps fleets do just that. Welcome, Toan. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, how's it going? We're up. Glad to
It's
be
going
here.
awesome. Nice hat. We like your hat. You're going to have to
I
send
like
us
it
one.
too. It's a hat kind of day for
It
us
is a
all.
hat kind of day. Yeah, we've checked all the boxes here. Anyway, hey, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're looking forward to talking with you, picking your brain on kind of the platform that you've spent the last several months, maybe years, kind of building out, and how it's unique from other offerings out in the industry, and more importantly, just kind of like we said, best practices for fleets that are charged with complying with all of these regulations. All of these rules are thrown at them, and they have to develop these processes and systems to help them manage that, or it could quickly overwhelm them. So thanks so much. Before we dig into that detail, can you give, for folks that don't know you, maybe just your background and how you got into the industry?
Hey everyone, a little bit about myself. My journey into trucking started when I was a software engineer at Uber Freight. That was back in probably 2017, early 2017, and I come over to the Uber Freight team from Uber rideshare business. Just software engineers, and really definitely build a lot of initial initiative around carrier onboarding. How do we build a better experience for carriers? And yeah, and about a couple of years in, I crossed paths with my other co-founder Tim, and we saw it as an opportunity to innovate and continue to build a lot of product in the freight logistics space, and that's kind of how we started Haul a couple of years back.
Awesome. So tell us about Hall. Rob and I are familiar with it. We've had lots of good discussions with you and Tim, and kind
Yeah.
of got to play around in it. And it kind of blew our minds, to be honest with you. We've over the years, Rob and I have pretty much demoed every other system that exists out there to help fleets manage compliance. And you showed us some things through your demo that kind of blew our mind, and we can get into those later. Rob can give his example, but it was the reason that we decided that Hall was going to be our partner for sure for our Trucksafe managed services, a service that we announced a few weeks ago. But tell us about Hall, what it is, how you guys help fleets with their compliance.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. When we look at Hall and the product we built over the last few months and years, we are a technology first platform, and both Tim and I, we come from a technology background, but we also come from logistic background. So we call ourselves pragmatic builders. What we want to build Hall to become is a technology first platform, but bringing in a lot of the first class technologies today, the machine learning, the AI model, and then be able to streamline the process for safety professional, fleet owner to effectively and manage the compliance and safety and risk in their operations. We're not just throwing here's some AI, here's some machine learning model, and take it and run. Like nobody gonna know what to do with it. But what we do is how do we apply these technologies in a day to day? How can we make the process better and streamline the process, and ultimately have kind of more effective operations?
I feel like the popular thing to do if you're a service is to throw the word or throw the acronym AI in front of it and try and get people's attention. But tell us how AI really kind of works in your system. How are you really leveraging it to make things easier for your fleet customers?
100%. When you look for us, we look at and we talk to a lot of fleet. We talk to a lot of persona, different fleet safety professionals across the industry, and we're like, what kind of problem are you facing today? And when it come down to like, hey, I have to deal with a lot of different documents. I have to, as a fleet safety manager, I have to run my day to day in maybe 5 or 6 different systems if I'm lucky. And it's starting at like hiring a driver as maybe a recruiter or a fleet owner of a 50 power units. I have to do all of that myself, and starting with an application to like, hey, how do I get a CDL, a license for my driver? How do I collect the medical certificate? I didn't know I have to cross-check that certificate with the National Registry site. I heard you guys talk a little bit about that, and that is a ever-changing regulations. So now how do we, what we do is we have, using the machine learning model that we build, classify the documents, extract the key piece of data from each of these documents. But that's just the beginning. After that, we start to overlay the regulations, right? The regulations are very clear. So that's what the software can do very well. It can be very deterministic. If your license expired, it expired. You should not be on the road. If your medical certificate doesn't match, what's on your MVR, that is not certified. That is just a very deterministic that the software can do very well. And with that, we've seen we were able to bring the machine learning model that we built to, shout out to Sharon at Bo Moses Trucking in Arkansas, right? Like she's using these tooling every day, not knowing like she's interacting with the AI model and the machine learning. That is, how we can apply this technology to user like Sharon.
Rob, I know, Toan's kind of, preaching to the choir here with you and I. We have been involved in the industry for many years we don't have to look very far back to when we were a very paper-driven industry. A lot of the driver file documents, even still, for a lot of carriers, are kept in filing cabinets in the back room. And then if we need to pull them out, we are going back there, pulling out the documents. Sometimes those things are 5 inches thick because of all of the crap that gets left in there. And so, Rob, I'm curious your thoughts on, because you've run the compliance programs for several fleets in the past, including very large ones. What was your philosophy when it came to storing and managing driver files, for example?
Well, for me, the big piece of it was always the human element. Like that's always where the fail was, right? So the second piece of that was, can you create a system where everything is in one? Where you're not having platform fatigue and those types of things. So that was my two big focuses, but it all starts with the first piece of eliminating that human element. And anytime you're having these paper files, you're relying on someone to go in there and check them or to manually track them somewhere. It's kind of like the old whiteboard maintenance program follow through. You go in anybody's shop in the old days and it was just a whiteboard where they scribble like unit 357 needs an oil change before whenever. If you happen to look at it, you might remember.
And somebody comes by and erases it.
Yeah. And then it's gone, right? So that was where I really kind of fell in love with the technology aspect of, all these other programs that had come out. And we've built some really good ones with some really good programs, some really good systems and processes with some really good programs that are on the market. But one of the things that always lacked was, I would say, complete or semi-complete pushing out that human element. So you still had that issue of trash in, trash out. So whatever that human was putting in that system, it had the ability to be, instead of a driver's license, it might be the pizza menu. There was nothing really analyzing, hey, is this human putting in the right stuff? And is it a compliant document? So you run the risk of then having your technology become essentially a human failure because it's trash in, trash out. One of the things that I liked with Hall was, and kind of that grabbed my attention with Hall, was something that I had never seen. Lots of people had talked about it, but nobody had actually made it come to fruition. So Toan, he pitched his spiel, and I'm just shaking my head, like, yeah, right. I've heard this before. OCR having the ability to read documents, etc., or recognition of dates and registry numbers versus names. So I tried it out, and I put in my own med card. I put in my own driver's license. I put in my own application. And then as I put in the med card, I transposed digits. So I changed the registry number of Dr. Wayne Reynolds, and who did my med cert. And when it came through, it spun for a minute, and I'm like, this is taking forever. And then it pops up and says, med card not accepted. The registry number doesn't match. This is not a good card. So I then was like, whoa, this is something else, and it actually detected that this document wasn't a legit med card. There was a problem with it. And that's not something that we've really had in the past. Like whenever I've had that human element system and process built, when you're auditing that, I have found credit card statements as driver's license. I've had pizza menus as med cards, and that can become a mess. So this was a game changer for me.
Yeah, because the way that plays out, if we're not using a system like Halls that will automatically detect that for you, is you're, like you said, Rob, you're relying on somebody in your organization to put eyes on that, and not just put eyes on the document, but to actually look at the registry number and recognize that the digits don't match up with the doctor who's listed on the National Registry. And like I said, the way that plays out is if you get audited as a motor carrier, DOT comes in, you better be sure that they are doing that level of checking, and they are cross-referencing your driver's med cards against the National Registry. And if they see that type of thing, that is going to be a violation on your part. So taking that human element out of it as best as you can. I mean, we're not going to get rid of the human element completely, obviously, and I don't think Toan would profess to do that with the Hall system. But minimizing it, keeping it to a minimum as best as possible goes a long way, not only for that reason of minimizing mistakes and stuff like that, but also from just increasing the efficiency of your safety department, which is often lacking resources to begin with. If we can push off some of this stuff, have it done for us at the front end, it saves a lot of time on the back end, it seems to me.
Yeah, it goes, go ahead, Toan.
No, I just want to quickly add, not only safety manager we look into, but like overall fleet operations, we have seen fleet that a lot of time, like the owners to collect document is not on the safety manager. They kind of like outsource that to the manager of the driver manager or the dispatcher in that case. Like, hey, and they motivate to do that. They motivate to get their driver back on the road. So a lot of time they ask operations to say, hey, can you collect the med cert for me? Can you collect the driver license? Otherwise, your driver will not be on the road tomorrow. And that's just, I believe, misalignment of incentive, right? Operations should have the time to work on operations and do customer service, and that's where we create a direct link between safety and compliance team to the driver and allow the driver to just interact directly, collect document seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge benefit, particularly for smaller fleets that where you may have one or two individuals who are wearing all of those hats. They're not just the safety director, they're the ops manager, they're the dispatcher, they're the customer service rep. If we can leverage technology to help those people that are wearing the multiple hats kind of manage the things that can be hands off when it comes to compliance, then they can really focus their time, as you guys said, on the things that really matter in terms of keeping our nation's highways safe. Greg from YouTube's asking, how would the system get managers to bring their commercial vehicles in for systematic maintenance, or does it not get into this area? I think this is a good time, Toan, I know you're prepared to kind of show a quick screen share of the system. So let's just do that and show and answer Greg's question directly, which is about fleet maintenance.
Cool. I'll get to that in a second. But first we can kind of start with maybe the driver module. And when you look at this, our platform here, we introduced several concepts or a notion that we've seen really common and resonate really well with the safety manager out there. One is the compliance until concept. We understand that no drivers or even no assets are compliant forever. So what we do is we create, and we call that the enforcer or compliant engines that actually compute the compliance date of any particular driver or asset time, equipment, tractor or trailer. And that is the common lowest denominator across a variety of signals. For a driver, that is when is the license expire, when was the last time the annual MVR review was run, When was the last time?
Those things can really get fleets in trouble. I mean, some of the most common violations that we see in roadside inspections are drivers operating on expired licenses or unexpired med cards, and those start to stack up, and then the next thing you know, you got the DOT knocking at your door because you've got a systemic problem there.
Exactly. So, we incorporate that because otherwise you're going to rely on someone on an SOP, and then ultimately you have to maybe put that in an Excel spreadsheet and start to like tracking for every single driver at least 7 to 10 different important date, and that can be missed very easily. So that's one idea, one concept that we introduced. And then as you look into a particular driver file, we start to incorporate what are the requirements from a regulation perspective today. We look at the DOT safety planner, right? We put that into actions. Hey, for compliant file, you need to have these type of documents. For drug and alcohol, you need to have these type of document to manage. Some that DOT require, some that really good practice to have. And that
the safety planner, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a document that the FMCSA publishes that is ostensibly aimed at helping to strip the regulations of their legalese and offer in plain language a playbook for how you are supposed to be managing compliance. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Toan, you've kind of used that as your playbook in building out these various systems for driver files and maintenance files, stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the guideline that we took on, and our challenge for our engineering product team is how can we take that guideline, which is also actually pretty digestible from the DOT, and then how do we bring that into the application? So, anyone who maybe is their first day as a recruiter or hiring manager can understand. I don't run a for-hire carrier every day. This is, trucking is a part of my larger business. I'm a private fleet. I don't know everything that need to be compliant in order to be compliant. This will have that.
We see that with a lot of private carriers, construction companies, telecom companies. Trucking is not their business. The trucks are just a tool for them to do their main line of business, and they don't view themselves as a trucking company. And so what we found is a lot of these regulations take a back seat. But from a DOT perspective, the DOT treats you virtually the same as a regulated trucking company. So if you don't have your things in order here, you're going to run into the same problems that a for-hire trucking company would.
Oh. And maybe one example I want to share here, right? For example, how's the extractions and the workflow are taken into place is, for example, in this driver, I uploaded a SID right, which is a great thing to do. It's almost become a requirement. The DOT requires you to do an investigation into a driver driving history in the last 3 years. And the SID will tell you is the current license is valid, and if the driver have any license in the previous 3 years. So when you upload a SID, we detect what is the current license matches with what's available. But more than that, we also detect what are the previous license that the driver have held, and then we cross-check that do we have an MVR in place for this previous state. If we don't, that is a flag. That make the file incomplete. And we incorporate the regulation into this process. And
so you're flagging all of these issues that you're detecting for whoever is managing the account to see at a glimpse, here's the problems that I have across my universe of driver files.
Right. And to rectify that problem or that issues, there can be a very quick action. Say, hey, if it's something that I need the driver to send me a new license, that could be a very quick flow to just from this platform request that document from the driver, and we build a completely web-based process on the driver side. Every driver today have a smartphone. Most of us have smartphone that have a camera on it that allow the driver to don't have to download any single app, but just use the camera and a web-based process that works across Android and iOS devices to send out document back in, and that go through the same process. The engine will run extract the information and cross-validate. So that workflow, that I call that an embedded compliance that just runs and continuously being calculated every time there's a change to a driver profile or maybe to an equipment profile.
Rob, in your experience, I was going to ask, is this how you like to do your workflow? I've got to assume I've never run a regulated fleet. I've worked with a lot, but just the idea of having to get drivers to come in to give you their updated med card or their license, or take a picture of it and email it to you, it seems like that could be a headache, particularly the larger you get. So, Rob, is this the type of workflow that you like to have?
I'm kind of two ways on it. So from a compliance standpoint, it allows you, it kind of goes back to that efficiency of labor piece. So how much wasted labor do you have in this process? And in that, basically this system helps eliminate a lot of wasted labor to where you can focus your efforts and your team on the things that really matter. So by eliminating that interaction with the driver, that's a good thing from a wasted labor standpoint, because it's less interaction, it's less communication. And if you're like me, who was a driver, I know drivers like to talk. Most of them, I did not. I would, that wasn't me. But generally, that's driver. So sometimes I can get caught up with a driver for 2 hours, just because somebody wants to listen to what he has to say. Now, from an HR culture relation standpoint, I'm not in love with it as much, just because I think you need to interact with the driver to show that, hey, we value you as a driver. So from that piece, I think the communication lines still need to stay open, and there has to be a special emphasis put on that when you're managing it that way. But from a typically, when I've been in these rooms, like at the decision maker level, that's not their focus. Their focus typically is on how much does this cost, and a significant portion of that cost is going to go to how much does it cost to administrate this program. And then that's what you come up with wasted labor and the true cost of operating one of these systems. So that's one of the things that I liked about this one, is it cuts down the most in terms of wasted labor in comparison with other systems on the market. So that's one of the things that I did like about it. The process of managing it is, that's typically how I would prefer to do it. But
that's an interesting point, Rob. I think one story I relate to is on that driver communication piece that we definitely as engineers, and I nerded out on this, where I can easily build a system to automatically send a driver a text and say, hey, I need, maybe 60 days before your license even expire, send in your license. And really soon, when we validate with our fleet user, they say, no, don't send my driver. I want to manage that communications, but there's a lot of go into it, and there's a whole context that we might not be aware. That's what we feel like you, as a fleet owner, fleet manager, you control that communication with the drivers, and using this as a tool to make that communications way easier. I want to maybe take a second on maybe answering Greg's questions around the commercial vehicle. So we also have a commercial vehicle module here on the equipment side, and from managing the vehicle annual inspections, we are working on adding all the PMs, or the preventive schedule. The beautiful thing about the ability to bring on data from a variety of places is we know the current odometer on the truck, we know the current engine hours. So when you set up your PM scheme, right, schedule A, B, C, D, that will actually continuously being updated and send you a reminder.
How are you pulling in that data, Toan?
We do via integrations with the telematics provider. So today we support really easy integrations. If you are on common provider out there like Motive or Samsara, it's actually a very quick click of a button to click into this, and then it's in our integration tab. You can actually click into this, select your providers, and that's really it. You provide a quick access. And boom, that's, we sync over the driver roster, equipment roster, we sync over HOS violations, safety events. DVIR, sort of that flow into, and the byproduct of the DVIRs, we have the current odometer as well as anything that's coming out of the engine bus.
Wow. So this really is, and this is kind of what won Rob and I over. It really is like a cockpit for the safety manager. They're able to, at their fingertips, kind of put out fires, see where the fires are, number one, which is something that we're always preaching to our clients, is the need to be proactive in this stuff rather than reactive. If we can get a quick picture of where things are starting to go wrong, then we can get our arms wrapped around it before it balloons into a problem that's going to draw the attention of the DOT, or draw the attention of your commercial auto liability insurer, or draw the attention of the plaintiff's bar. So it seems like there are lots of tools available through the system to tip off to the safety managers that there may be smoke in some of these areas.
Yeah, I think the way we look at at least when we approach this, is there's just a lot of noise. If with pretty much everyone is on some sort of telematics provider today, and EOD provider, and it's just the more trucks you have, the more data points you're going to be inundated with, and that's at some point you either numb to all these alerts or email that are coming out of this device every single day, and how do we make that actionable? And
yeah, we did a show. I think our second ever Trucksafe Live was called "Drinking from a Fire Hose," and it was a show where we were talking about fleets being inundated with all of the data that's coming at them from various sources, whether it be your ELD data or your event recorders, your cameras, or CSA data coming from the FMCSA, all of that stuff. And the question is, how are you managing that? Because the risk you run is, it's great that you've got all that technology, but if you're not doing anything with the data that you're getting in, then you're running yourselves into new problems, which is being viewed as putting your head in the sand when the data was telling you that there was something wrong. So the whole point of that show was that you got to have policies in place, you got to have people in place and systems to be able to ingest that data, and then help you manage it, show you where things are going wrong, so that then you can take action on it, so that you don't run yourselves into those problems. So that's a great solution.
Yeah, when with the data that we bring in, we look at a lot, and I look at hundreds of thousands. I don't personally look at hundreds of thousands of safety critical event, but from a data analytics standpoint, we look at it, and really these the nuclear verdict or the crashes, they are not random, for the most part. There's a breadcrumbs in the data that show these leading up to it. And how do we view a system that actually provide actionable insight to manager that can take actions in the data is there. What can you do? How can you actually digitize that workflow and create a process that kind of, I call that a recipe. And if you think of every safety manager, which is, it's hard to find a good safety manager. I think it's become a very top profession. That it's like a chef, that you have your own recipe. There's a baseline, and then there's the flavor. There's a recipe that every safety manager brings on to the table based on the experience, maybe the risk exposure that you have in the past. How do we create a workflow, a recipe builder that, hey, this is how I look at risk. This is how I want to manage this process, this fleet.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. To your point about nuclear verdicts, you mentioned that there is always that trigger. Usually it's in the data somewhere that ultimately causes those cases. We saw that. I've talked about this case at length in various forums, but the first ever $1 billion case in Florida against a couple of trucking companies is a couple years ago. And if you look at what caused the jury to come back with a $1 billion jury verdict against those fleets, you see that one of the fleets, one of the drivers for one of the motor carriers in that case, was operating on an expired CDL. Not an expired CDL. the wrong type of license for the vehicle that he was driving. And then you look at the other driver who was involved in the wreck, the other commercial driver, we see that he was in excess of his hours of service limit. So those were both data points that should have been visible to both of those carriers. And had they acted on the data that should have been available to them, then they would have prevented being in that position in the first place. So that is often the case. Those cases that go south very quickly are often the result of some type of trigger, and it's often in the data that is coming at you, but you are not doing a good job at effectively managing. Yeah. Rob, I know you've seen that play out time after time in your own experience. Maybe you could speak to that as well. This kind of idea that having people and processes in place to keep an eye on where things are going wrong.
I mean, the system is only as good as you put in it, but after that, it's only as good as you manage it. So you have all this data that's coming at you, and if you don't ever do anything with it, then obviously that's going to cause you a bunch of issues. It's kind of telematics is a great example. You now have all this visibility and awareness, and if you don't do anything with the visibility or the awareness, then you can't prevent anything. And two, it's going to cause you some exposure if one of your drivers is ultimately in a crash. So it's no different with DQ file management. When you have these things popping up that, hey, this driver's license is expired, or his registry verification number doesn't match the doctor. All those things are things that you should be checking. And that's really the big piece, is just managing everything that you have coming in from a data perspective and actually doing something with it.
Yeah. Daniel on LinkedIn is asking, do you also have California 90-day 90-day inspections, 90-day vehicle inspections built into the system so that they could track kind of the expiration of those inspections? How's that work, Toan?
Yes, so what we look at the regulations, and that's a great question in terms of do you support the regulations? Is really, there's just a lot of regulations in every state, and you operate in California, good luck to you, right? It's just another layer of regulations. And then not only California, maybe in certain city, there's even a municipal layer of regulations. We don't want to keep track of all that regulation. Here's why. These are ever changing. So what we do is we build a really flexible document management. Hey, if you operate in California and you want to add a tracking of the California 90 days vehicle inspection form, is go into our tooling, you create a custom document. You said, hey, I want to track and I want to notify every 90 days of this document. And that's just the form. And that's it. And the system, the compliance engine will then run every day. It's like, hey, is this the document that was just added for California? I need to track that every 90 days. And off you go. Because we have seen just a lot of documents, and it's all in paper.
So very customizable. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
It's good from a policy perspective as well. I mean, if you have, your policy documents that you want to put in the system, it's a good place to store those as well. I mean, there's compliance, and then there's exposure. So another significant piece of your exposure is making sure that you have the policies in place, but also that drivers have acknowledged them and that you have them in their file. So, if you need to store, say, a handbook or a signed drug and alcohol policy or a signed distracted driving policy or whatever it is you have
hazmat training, that type of stuff.
Hazmat training. Yeah. It just brought up a reminder, Brandon. But yeah, all those things are good to have because, it's one thing to be compliant, but all those policies can cause you some exposure in different ways.
Yeah, another question that came to my mind, or another point that I wanted to make was, and I'll pose it to you guys as a question. It seems like early on when a lot of these vendors, your competitors, were coming out, we had some big players early on, and it felt like it was they were systems that were tailored to the large fleets, the mega fleets. It was those fleets that were early adopters of the technology and were using the technology and digitally storing their driver files, tracking that type of stuff. But it seems like as time goes on, that a lot the fleet size, that is taking advantage of this type of technology is coming down. It's becoming more accessible to them, more affordable to them. And so I wonder your thoughts on, how these types of systems, yours in particular, Toan, kind of scale with the fleet size.
Yeah, coming back to the point that we are a very pragmatic builders, and we think like, we have very limited resource, engineering and our time. How do we use something that is work as a common denominator for whether you are a mega carrier that have 10,000 drivers on the road, to maybe a private fleet that run a bakery that maybe I have 2 trucks. How can this work for me? And when we start identify the common things, and one of these common things, as you pointed out, is large mega carriers have a pretty large compliance team, and traditionally the software offering have been to kind of like still work with the compliance team, but it's still, hey, rely on that. I need someone to scan this paper, and it doesn't free them a lot of the time to do more compliance stuff. It's become a lot of administrative burden. So we focus on for large carriers a lot of the efficiency gains, and how do you create, you want to grow more driver, how you can support more driver, grow your fleet with the same team that you have today. And then for the smaller fleet, the way we build it is allow access to this machine learning and AI technology that we incorporated. And that is just, hey, you don't have to know everything about the regulations. Here's the template. Here's some good template that you can follow and start off. And but then ultimately you need to pair this with an industry expert. Like, hey, I can help you. The software not going to tell you, hey, you're going to need to have a safety policy because your CSA score is going downhill.
Well, one of the things that with that one is, a lot of carriers that were small would look at these systems and they would say, hey, that's not something I need, man. I only have like 10 trucks or 15 trucks or 20 or whatever. But at the end of the day, I found that a lot of these carriers needed it. They just didn't have the perspective of what it was that they were being offered. So, there's that piece, but then there was also that cookie cutter element of where we would get calls to say, hey, who do you recommend from an ATS or a document standpoint? And it's like, there's no cookie cutter answer to that, because depending on your size and depending on your need, you may not need something with all the bells and whistles of one of your biggest competitors, or you may not need XYZ. Maybe you just need document storage. Maybe you don't need somebody to help you manage it or to advise on policy or exposure and those things. So at the end of the day, you get to a system where a lot of people in the middle are kind of like out-dollared because those systems can be expensive. But where we're getting to now, I think, is where these systems like yours are becoming more appealing because, hey, it can help you manage these processes. It can help you track and store documents, fleet preventive maintenance, predictive maintenance intervals. But it's also not expensive. There's no barrier there to the service that you're offering. It's not expensive.
Yeah,
So,
there is no excuse anymore, even for the smallest of the small fleets out there, to not be using some system like this. I mean, historically, you guys are right. It's the smaller fleets are largely still paper based. There's just no excuse for it anymore because these systems are cheap compared to what they used to be. They are a steal for the service that they are providing to you and keeping watch of these things that you don't have time to keep watch of, or that you don't have internal resources to take care of. So you really need to be looking into systems. The playing field has changed in this space in a big way. So I'm recommending to all of our clients, regardless of their size, that if they've got things in paper nowadays, they really need to be transitioning that to an electronic process for sure.
Yeah, you cannot track what you cannot see, and a lot of times is if the data is sitting there, which is I think at some point today we're still spending a lot of time and our resources to look into the digitalization process of these documents, and it may sound simple, but it is what it is. There's still a lot of paper sitting out there, and there's a lot of time we when we sit down with our team, we think, how do we have fleet digitize these files? Maybe do we need to build a better scanner for this fleet, right? Do we build a better camera that allow them to extract the piles of Manila folder a lot faster, a lot more efficient. So that's where definitely where we spend a good amount of mental bandwidth.
So we're running out of time here, but go ahead, Rob, and then I've got one more point I want to make.
No, that I was just going to touch on the paper piece. When I started at an enterprise carrier that was PE backed, they had 16 DOT numbers, thousands of vehicles, thousands of drivers, and what you would have all over the country is paper files. So there was no remote access. If you wanted to audit, you'd have to fly to California's terminal to audit those paper files. And if you had an audit and your headquarters with DOT was based in Richmond, Virginia, somebody would have to ship all of those files or to scan them and send them. And it was a huge debacle. So again, it goes back to the proficiency of labor and cutting down on the wasted effort and wasted labor and ultimately wasted money. But when I started there, it was all paper. So, I mean, we literally had to ship like 50 bank boxes of documents, some that were 2 feet long. And it was just this constant dread of getting those in the system. But once you did, you were able to cut down your efforts by like 75% because the system did everything for you. It was, hey, you have your supplemental documents of say MVRs or annual clearinghouses or new med cards or new driver's license that you would have to update periodically. But you had the effort of the system that kind of maintained everything for you. So it's worth the effort to go through that, regardless of size, to get to that piece of efficiency. So it's kind of like that old thing of like, do I pay more money up front or do I continue to pay more money over time? And if you put the effort in up front, then your recurring expense is going to go way down.
Yeah, and the last thing mine kind of dovetails right into that. It's something we didn't really have time to get to, but it's kind of the whole enforcement side of this equation, and what the tools can help fleets do, regardless of your size, in the context of enforcement. So, like for example, I know that Hall has an integration with DOT as well, so that if you're a fleet, you can hook it up to your DOT account and see your CSA scores and your inspection data right there in that kind of control center, that dashboard that's available to you, so that, to Rob's earlier point, you're not dealing with this platform fatigue where you're having to go out to all these different platforms to see these different things that you're expected to look at as a regulated fleet. You can look at it all right here in one system. And along the same lines is, God forbid you ever get audited by the DOT. There's so much to be said for the being organized in that context, getting your files in a format that is easily reviewed by the officer and in the order that they want to see it, and in a timely manner. The DOT regs only give you 48 hours to produce documents if the DOT is asking for them. So if you've got those spread out in paper files or in multiple systems, we see this play out time after time where fleets struggle to timely get documents to law enforcement when they're asking for them in a way that is organized and doesn't look like you just are a complete disaster to them. So many audits go well for our clients, largely in part, due in part to the fact that they have all of their compliance documents organized in an organized fashion, and they are able to get them to the officer quickly and answer questions quickly. So that's another huge reason for fleets to consider this type of technology. But anyway, we're about out of time. Toan, thanks so much for joining us, for showing us the system. If anybody has any questions about the system or wants to check it out, where can they go?
Yeah, they can go to hallcompliance.com, and that's our domain, or they can reach out to us directly. My email is Toan, Toan, @hallcompliance.com.
Great. Hey, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon. Robert's going to wrap things up for this show. We didn't even really talk about Trucksafe Managed Services, but we did at the beginning. Like we said, we have partnered with Hall. Trucksafe has partnered with Hall, and we are now offering our Trucksafe Managed Services, which is a white glove service for fleets of all types and sizes to manage these processes for them, help them build out their policies and procedures and workflows, getting all of their documents into the Hall system so that they can then use it to their benefit. So if you got any questions on that, or if you want to see if there's anything we can do to help you, reach out to Rob at trucksafe.com. Look at our website, trucksafemanage.com. That's where you can check out all those details. That's about it. Anything else, Rob?
I don't have anything else.
All right. Well, we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned for our announcement about our next show. Visit Trucksafe Live for the details and to watch prior episodes, and we will catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.